Welcome back to the Jason Rand Show on AM 770, KTTH, 94.5 FM on the Greater East Side. Homelessness is taking over parts of the city of Seattle. City leaders have essentially decided, hey, we're going to cede over our property, our parks, to the homeless without any meaningful plan to get them off the streets and into some kind of long-term solution. Over the weekend, a local group called Unified Seattle, they helped clean up Longfellow Creek Forest in West Seattle. Brendan Colding was there to help. He is a former SPD lieutenant, and he is a current candidate for the Seattle City Council. Brendan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Jason. I appreciate it.
So take us through exactly what happened over the weekend.
Well, on Sunday, we had a really great opportunity to go in with Unified Seattle and another organization called the Hand Up Project, which is led by a gentleman named Robert Smiley, who used to be homeless himself. He hires people who have experienced homelessness and addiction to work with him to clean up these camps. And we had the opportunity to visit a couple of different vacated encampments, actually right here in District 1, and actually not too far from where I live. And we went in with a group of volunteers, and we cleaned them up. We took out trash. We took out old beer bottles and old cartons of milk. And most importantly, we removed pretty close to 100 needles, some of which still had heroin loaded up in them.
Well, and isn't there, there's a school really close by, right?
There's a school directly across the street, yes.
So when you encounter these things, what's the first thing that goes through your mind as a candidate, but also as a former cop?
Well, the first thing that goes to mind is as a parent, which is, my kids live in this area. I don't want them encountering this. As a candidate, it's that this is the product of failed leadership coming from City Hall for many years, where we've allowed this situation to perpetuate to the point where you really can't look under a tree anymore without finding this sort of thing. And as an officer, it's frustrating that our rule of law has been compromised to the extent that this is common in our city, and that we have opportunities for people to engage in this kind of work where they're going in on a Sunday to clean up all these needles that really shouldn't have been there in the first place.
So how unsafe is it right now for kids at parks? I mean, obviously I don't want to go overboard in saying not a single kid is safe in a park, but it does seem to me that it's getting worse and worse.
It's getting worse and worse. It's not that all of our parks are completely unsafe. What I would recommend for children and their parents is to stay in open areas, staying on the lawn, stay where you can see what's out there. And thereby, if there's a needle, hopefully you can avoid it. My 6-year-old happened to find, luckily, a needle without the needle, just kind of the plastic part of it, at Alki Beach 2 weeks ago.
Wow!
So they're out there. Just keep your eyes open. Parents should instruct their kids not to pick those up. They should tell them to tell an adult if they find one. But I do believe the most important advice is to just stay where you can see. Don't jump into the ivy. Don't jump into the pine needles and the trees. Just remain where you can see what you're playing on.
What's the impact this is having on the West Seattle community in general?
The West Seattle community is more lightly affected by this than other districts. But what I'm telling people as I doorbell and as I get in front of groups is we're not immune to this. This is happening all around us. It's happening in areas you can't really see. We don't have as many tents up on sidewalks and in invisible areas around West Seattle. But if you poke around, you can find this situation. So it is having an impact. There haven't been any high-profile incidents of people getting hurt around West Seattle, but we don't want that to happen. So we need strong leadership at City Hall to clean this situation up.
Well, then, you've teed it up for yourself in a little way. Lisa Herbold obviously is a current council member. She's running for re-election. She didn't earn the endorsement by the Seattle Times, which says exactly where, the mindset of folks here are going. Why do you think it's gotten worse under her watch?
Well, it's gotten worse under this entire current council, and she's the representative from District 1, because we've practiced the policy, and I give Chris Rufo credit for this, the policy of false compassion, where we're not holding people accountable, where we're not investing in adequate services, where we're not allowing our law enforcement professionals to do their job. And we just need sea change at City Hall. We need to reverse the culture because it's only getting worse.
So what does that actually mean as far as a policy is concerned? Because I'm going through right now some emails through a public disclosure request that make it very, very clear that Lisa Herbold does not support these camp sweeps at all, including it would appear when we have shelter beds and shelter space available for folks. So if you're a council member, what are you pushing day one to go after this problem?
We need to get appropriate services online, so that we can offer people what they need. We can offer them treatment and shelter, and then insist that if they don't accept services, we will enforce the law unless they choose to move along. We need both carrot and stick, which is what I've come to articulate as our solution to this problem. And Lisa will even say we sweep encampments, but there's always 400 in the city, and that's because people go from encampment to encampment. We need to start reducing that number. And that's, I'd say, my biggest change I want to implement on day one.
And this is not even, no offense, it's not a novel approach, right? I mean, this is being used right now in the city of Marysville, in Arlington, Snohomish County, in general, is approaching things this way. And they've seen significant results. And yet, here in Seattle, for some reason, they're just unwilling. Why do you think they're so unwilling to try this approach?
That's a great question, and I'm really not sure why our city leadership has been resistant to enforcement. I think City Hall is largely occupied by people of a very limited ideology in terms of how you actually solve problems and how you value accountability within government. And you talk about Marysville, that's just smart government. You know, you have a rule of law for a reason.
Yeah.
You have a police department for a reason. You have services and you have funds that you can spend appropriately, all for good reasons. And that's why it's important to actually apply your resources and your personnel in a way that impacts the community for good and doesn't deny the fact that there is a problem when there indeed is one.
It's about getting the head from underneath the sand and actually taking a look at what's happening in our parks that are literally across the street from a school. And the incumbent, Brendan, my friend, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I'd just like to end with the fact I'm very proud to have gotten the endorsement from Mr. Smiley, who I spoke with earlier, who I spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
He runs the Hand Up Project. Anyone who's interested can check out my website, www.brendancolding.com.
Brendan Colding. Colding is spelled with a K.com. Brendan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. Have a great day.
You've been listening to The Jason Rand Show. I'll see you tomorrow. Up next.